Hey everyone, and welcome back to Healing Growth. So today we're going deep into something that might just save you some future heartache. We're talking about those early warning signs in dating. Think of it as our decoder ring for spotting red flags. I'm so excited to be unpacking all of this with our resident relationship expert. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I think this is such a crucial topic because, understanding these dynamics can really empower people to make healthier choices in their dating lives.
100% agree with you on that. And, it can be so tricky because, especially in the beginning, everyone's usually on their best behavior, putting their best foot forward. It's like that whole first impression thing.
Absolutely. We all have this natural desire to be liked and accepted, right? So we tend to present ourselves in the most favorable light, especially when we're meeting someone new. It's kind of like we're putting on a little bit of a mask. And there's actually a psychological basis for this.
Okay, unpack that for us. The psychology behind the mask. Why do we do this?
Well, it goes back to our basic human need for connection. We want to be seen as attractive, competent, and desirable, so we highlight those qualities and downplay anything that might be perceived as negative or off-putting. It's a form of self-preservation, really.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like we're trying to create this curated version of ourselves,
Yeah.
hoping to make a good impression. But here's the thing, and I'm sure so many of you can relate to this. No one can keep up that perfect facade forever, right? Those little cracks inevitably start to show.
Oh, I think we've all been there. It's so easy to get caught up in that initial attraction and the excitement of a new connection. But that's exactly why it's so important to pay attention to those small slips, those seemingly insignificant moments. That can actually reveal a lot about someone's true character.
Okay, give us some examples. What are some of those subtle cues that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, think about a rude remark disguised as a joke. Maybe they're impatient with a server or dismissive of someone they don't need to impress. These are just random one-offs. They're often indicators of deeper personality traits that might not be so charming in the long run.
Such a good point. It's like in a job interview.
Yeah.
You can have a stellar resume and ace all the interview questions. But it's those little unguarded moments that often reveal the most about who you really are. It's human nature to want to present our best selves. But it's those little slips that can offer a glimpse behind the curtain, so to speak.
Right. And it's important to pay attention to those moments
Yeah.
because our brains can play tricks on us, especially when we're feeling that initial spark of attraction.
Okay, tell us more about that. What's going on in our brains when we meet someone new and we're really into them?
Well, we tend to project our desires and fantasies onto the other person, filling in the blanks with what we want to see rather than what's actually there. It's like we're creating this idealized version of them in our minds. And this is where something called cognitive biases come into play.
What exactly are those? And how do they affect our perceptions in dating?
Cognitive biases are essentially mental shortcuts that our brains use to process information quickly. And while they can be helpful in many situations, they can also lead us astray, especially in dating. For example, there's a bias called confirmation bias, which means we tend to seek out and favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or desires, even if it means ignoring red flags.
Oh, wow. So if we're really attracted to someone, our brains might actually filter out information. That contradicts that attraction, even if it's important. No wonder it can be so hard to see red flags clearly in the early stages.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. And it's definitely something to be aware of. Because if we're not careful, those cognitive biases can lead us down a path of heartache and disappointment.
So how do we counteract these biases? How do we make sure we're seeing the person clearly?
That's where self-awareness and a healthy dose of skepticism come in. It's about checking in with ourselves and asking those tough questions. Am I seeing this person for who they truly are, or am I projecting my own desires onto them? Are my expectations realistic, or am I setting myself up for disappointment?
So important. And I think it's also crucial to pay attention to how someone reacts to boundaries, even small ones early on in dating. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. How someone responds to boundaries is a huge indicator of their respect for you and their emotional maturity. And by boundaries, I mean those little moments. When you need to express a preference, set a limit, or simply say no to something you're not comfortable with. Could be something as simple as saying you're not free one night, or that you'd prefer to take things slow.
I think that's so important, and I love that you brought it up. I'm really glad we're digging into this because, honestly, I think a lot of people struggle with setting boundaries, especially when they're excited about someone new. But it's so crucial for healthy relationships.
Yeah, it really is foundational because if someone can't respect your boundaries early on, what does that say about their long-term potential as a partner?
Totally. Okay, so let's play out a scenario. Let's say you're just not feeling up to going out one night. Maybe you've had a long week, and you just want to relax at home. You text your new date and say, hey, I'm not feeling up to going out tonight. Rain check. What would a healthy response look like?
A healthy response would show understanding and respect for your needs without any pressure or guilt tripping. They might say something like, "No worries, I totally get it. Hope you feel better. Let's reschedule soon."
Simple, straightforward, and respectful. That's what we like to see. But I think we all know that things don't always go that smoothly. So what are some red flag responses that might indicate trouble down the line?
Oh, there are a few classics. One is the guilt trip. They might say something like, "Oh, come on, I was really looking forward to seeing you. Are you sure you can't make it?" Trying to make you feel bad for prioritizing your well-being.
The guilt trip. It's like they're trying to manipulate you into doing what they want, even if it means disregarding your needs. Not a good sign.
Not at all. And then there's the anger or defensiveness response. They might lash out with something like, "Seriously, you're canceling on me again," as if you have this pattern of flaky behavior, when it's literally the first time you've had to reschedule.
Yeah, that's a good point. Overreacting like that is definitely a red flag. It suggests they might have difficulty regulating their emotions or respecting your decisions.
Right. And another red flag to watch out for is when they try to control the situation. By bargaining or minimizing your needs, they might offer to come over to your place instead, or suggest you just come out for a little bit. They're not respecting your no.
So basically, any attempt to override your decision or make you feel bad for setting a boundary is a sign that they might have some work to do in terms of respecting others' autonomy.
Exactly, because in a healthy relationship, both people should feel comfortable expressing their needs and setting boundaries without fear of backlash or manipulation.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to remember. These dynamics often play out in subtle ways, especially early on in dating. We might not even realize we're being manipulated or pressured into doing things we don't want to do. But those small moments can reveal a lot about someone's character and how they might treat us in the long run.
I couldn't agree more. It's all about paying attention to those patterns and trusting your instincts.
So what would you say are some practical tips for navigating those early stages of dating and spotting potential red flags? I mean, we've talked about the best behavior trap, those small slips that can reveal deeper truths, and the importance of boundaries. What else should people keep in mind?
Well, one of the most important things is to remember that actions speak louder than words. It's easy to get swept up in someone's charm or their promises, but pay attention to their behavior. Does it align with what they're saying? Do they follow through on their commitments? Consistency is key.
That's so important because anyone can talk a good game, but it's their actions that ultimately reveal their true character. Like if someone says they're going to call you and then they don't, that's a pretty clear sign that they might not be as reliable as they seem.
Right. It's those little things that add up over time, and it's not about being overly critical or nitpicky. It's about being observant and seeing if their words match their deeds.
And what about that whole idea of trusting your gut? I think we've all had those moments where something just feels off about someone, but we can't quite put our finger on it. What's your take on intuition and those gut feelings?
Well, our gut feelings are often based on subconscious observations and pattern recognition. Our brains are constantly picking up on subtle cues that we might not even be consciously aware of. So when something feels off, it's worth paying attention to because your brain might be picking up on something important that you haven't fully processed yet.
So it's like our intuition is trying to tell us something, even if we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle yet. That's so interesting.
It really is. And while it's not always 100% accurate, our intuition can be a powerful tool for guiding us toward healthy choices.
So to sum it up, we need to pay attention to actions over words, trust those gut feelings, and remember that consistency is a major green flag. But what if we're seeing some red flags? What's the best course of action?
Well, first and foremost, remember that you have the power to choose who you spend your time with. You don't owe anyone your time or energy, especially if you're seeing red flags that make you feel uncomfortable or unsafe.
That's such a powerful reminder. We don't have to settle for less than we deserve.
Exactly. And sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice you can make. It's a sign of strength and self-respect. But if you do decide to address the issue, clear communication is key.
Okay, so let's say you've noticed some red flags and you want to have a conversation about it. How do you approach that conversation in a way that's both assertive and respectful? I think a lot of people worry about coming across as too critical or judgmental, especially early on in dating.
That's a great point. And it's understandable to want to avoid conflict, especially when you're still getting to know someone. But if something is bothering you, it's important to address it directly.
So walk us through it. What are some tips for having that difficult conversation?
Well, first, choose the right time and place. You don't want to have this conversation in the middle of an argument or when you're both feeling stressed or rushed. Find a quiet, private setting where you can both speak freely without distractions.
Good point. Setting the right tone is so important.
Right. And when you're having the conversation, focus on I statements. Instead of saying you always do this or you never do that, try phrasing it as I feel uncomfortable when or I need.
Hmm.
It's less accusatory and more focused on your own experience.
That's such a good tip. It's about owning your feelings and expressing your needs without blaming the other person.
Exactly. And remember to be specific about the behavior that's bothering you. Don't just say you're not being respectful. Instead, give a concrete example. When you interrupted me earlier, I felt disrespected. Being specific helps the other person understand what you're referring to and makes it more likely that they'll take your feedback seriously.
Specificity is so important. It takes away the guesswork and makes it much clearer what you're trying to communicate.
Right. And finally, be prepared for their response.
Yeah.
They might be defensive, dismissive, or even apologetic. The important thing is to observe how they handle the feedback. Are they willing to listen it, understand your perspective, and take responsibility for their actions? Or do they shut down, blame you, or try to justify their behavior?
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's not just about whether they're willing to apologize, it's about whether they're willing to change.
Exactly, because a
Excellent.
genuine apology is meaningless if it's not followed by a genuine effort to do better.
I think this has been so insightful. We've covered so much ground already. But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap things up. We've talked a lot about red flags, those warning signs that might indicate a potential problem. But what about green flags? What are some positive signs early on that someone might actually be a good partner? And I'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What's one green flag you always look for in those early stages of dating? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts and experiences. And if you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more relationship insights. Until next time, take care.